Well, welcome. We're excited to have you here. And I would like to introduce to you Pastor Michael Kelly from the Mount Rubidoux Church right here in Southeastern California Conference. Pastor Kelly, thanks for being here, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, always thank you for, the invitation to come and have this important conversation. I've always, admired you and your ministry. I think we, are very kindred spirits when it comes to the way that we're doing our churches. I think the biggest thing is we don't wear suits when we preach.
Right.
So, no. But no, I have a young congregation, contemporary congregation here in the Inland Empire. Actually been here for about, 10 years now. Actually going on 11,
Wow.
In July. Southern California boy, graduated from La Sierra Academy. So I'm
What
back
year?
home.
What year did you graduate?
97?
Oh, you're much younger than I am.
Yeah.
Because I graduated from there too.
Right. Yeah, 97. So just been enjoying it. I mean, I always tell people there's only one place better than California. That's the New Jerusalem. So,
That's right.
It's good to be here.
That's right. So give me like the size of your church. My mom actually lives like 2 blocks from your church.
Really?
In Riverside. Yeah, right off of, is it Central?
Yeah, right there off of Central.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your church.
Yeah, so, we average, on a low Sabbath, we're at about 800. On a high Sabbath, we're about 1,100, and that's just in the building. We've got another 2,000 that watch us, online, that are live with us through, either Facebook or our website. And, we've really just been plugging along. I have a staff of about, 4 pastors, along with myself. And so we've just been trying to really make this impact, on the city, and God has been good. I think anytime you've been in a place for a while, it's either because they have nowhere else to send you, or, they're actually okay with the work you've been doing. So, we've been growing. To be quite honest, though, what I think was very interesting is there was a time when we were at about 1,600, in attendance. But honestly, those were like the looky-loos.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are like, oh, this is real cool, but oh, you really want us to be disciples? Nah, we're gonna go. So, we actually saw ourselves do this and then come back again, because now we really have that core of who's working with us.
Wow.
So,
That's awesome. We've talked a lot about, over the years, we've said, well, we should switch pulpits sometime.
Yeah.
And then we never have done
Right.
that. So we need to commit to that
we
at
have
some
to.
point.
We have to. And now it should be easier since we're recording.
It's true. It's true. You said to me the other day, you said, man, I'm only preaching for like 28 minutes now. It's great.
Yeah.
And like, that's all I ever
That's all you
preach.
ever do. Right.
You did something at your church that I thought was really cool. You had I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you do. You had a program where you were encouraging your people to go bless the businesses around your church. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we do is we just want to be able to show, I think, the love of God and connect with people in a very specific and tangible way that affects them. So many times we'll do like a track attack, like, hey, I don't know who you are, but come to my church service, right? Or I don't know who you are, come to my evangelistic effort. But we're really about building up, our community. So we've only gone to 2 mainstream corporations. For the most part, what we'll do is try to find a locally owned business. And I'll just go to them like on a Wednesday and say, hey, you're about to have 300 plus people show up to your business on Saturday night. So if you need some extra workers, we want to make sure that you're good. And so that's what we do. And we'll just pick one, in the Riverside Plaza we'll do, or just, probably within about 2-3 mile radius of our church. And it's great for us to fellowship with one another. But then we also just give that business. We don't pass out tracts. We let people know who we are, where we're from. And we've just created a lot of inroads and connections in the community that way, even to the point where there was one business that was doing poorly. And they're like, hey, would you guys mind coming again? And so we came, and we were able to help turn around, their month, as a result of that.
Awesome.
So
I always thought that was so cool, man. I really appreciate that.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. How did COVID hit you guys?
That's a great question. I love when people ask me that. Because of the way we view church, it did. We believed in media ministry. We believe that the church is not the building. So when COVID hit, it was actually a pretty easy transition. And I don't mean that in a mean way, because of what infrastructure we'd already put in place. And so there's some places I know they would have me out to preach, and we would talk about these kind of things, and they'd say about how hard it was, all no, it's not whatever. And I hate to say it, but it's like, here's the I told you so moment, because a lot of those churches were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. So COVID was actually, we hate that it happened. We've served more people as a result of doing it, we're feeding over 400 people every single week in the community. We're able to reach more people, with our, online, and we have more people giving their lives, to Christ. We just have some virtual baptisms that we're about to do from our online campus. We got someone in Chicago and Tulsa who have joined after COVID, and now they're getting ready to, get baptized. So it's hit us in a way where it's actually shown us more what we need to be as church and that we were on the right track. So
right. Yeah. Now, we had this conversation just a little bit, and then we'll get to more of what we want to talk about. But what is your plan on coming back? Because we struggle with that. We're looking for the different, timelines and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And bigger churches are having a little bit more of a hard time with that. So what have you been thinking? Yeah, so,
for us, there's a culture that we've established in Mount Rubidoux. And I think churches have a culture in general, and Mount Rubidoux has one specifically. And so with all the guidelines that are in place, we can't be who we are with those guidelines. Yeah. And so we said it would be inauthentic for us to come back into that space and not be who we are. And so we're going to wait. And if it's September, October, even November, we'll do that. Because to try and run 9 services, that would be a lot. And then even running that, I can't imagine. Can you imagine with the beautiful music you guys have here at Crosswalk, people in masks not being able to sing? There's no way.
It's almost mean. It's almost mean-spirited. Exactly. I think we're very much on the same track. We want to push people to homes and home fellowships and that sort of thing as the next step and the next phase as things begin to open up. But COVID's obviously not the only thing that's happened over the last few months and few weeks, certainly. And so you have a primarily African-American church. Mm-hmm. And how have you guys been feeling about everything? And then I also want to talk about what your experience has been in the Seventh-day Adventist Church as a Black pastor, and we can talk about some of those issues because we want to make sure that we're listening.
Yeah, first of all, I want to applaud you for this conversation and having it in your congregation. That's a lot of pastors, and we're going to be very candid. A lot of white pastors aren't going to want to have this conversation, particularly so you guys know there is no script. So he's like, what is he going to say? So I just applaud you for that, because this is where I think change and different things start to happen. We've always, it's very unique with even when you say, Black church and all these things that are happening, because historically throughout Adventism, there's been this tension between how do we fit in with the civil rights kind of struggle and still be this, prophetic, kind of church. And that's even affected, the Black community. So sometimes there's this thought that, it's a Black, these Black issues, is a Black church. Of course, they're all for it. And that's not necessarily, always the case. With Mount Rubidoux, totally different though. This is just who I am as a person. And so just being a part of a congregation that supports that, when issues like this take place, it's like, okay, what are we doing? We're with it. And not just preaching a sermon and not just being up front and saying a few prayers, but actually putting ministry and work and effort behind it. So my church is always on the front lines, when it comes to that. And I'm actually proud to be able to say that because I think it's our way of showing the gospel through social justice, because the gospel is social justice.
And I think that you've done, because you have been present in your community, you didn't just show up. In the midst of this, you've been a partner, someone who's been having these conversations from your standpoint with the broader community. So I think that makes a stronger impact.
Yeah, no, it does, because we're not, reactive, we're proactive. So if something happened, then all of a sudden we pop up, it's like, okay. We recognize that there are other issues that have been plaguing Black and brown people within our community. And so we're after that with our C3. We partner with my buddy Kevin Carrington to connect with people to teach minorities how to code. We're opening up our computer labs where we're teaching, getting kids opportunity to get tutoring. So we're already doing those kinds of things, having town hall conversations. So now when we do pop up, it's like, okay, we've seen Rubidoux throughout the years, they care, so we can get behind that. Right.
That's incredible. And I got to work with Kevin a little bit when I was over at Loma Linda University. He's amazing.
He's awesome.
He's great, man. So let's talk about race a little bit, and let's talk about race in the church a little bit. That's where we live and die. Yeah. Right. We're gospel preachers. We preach the gospel, and we belong to an organization that has struggled in some respects as well But before we jump into that, let's talk about concepts of race. I've been trying to read. My commitment through this time is to listen, to read, to learn, and to see where my heart can be cleansed and where my worldview can change a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the things that struck me is that the book I just read is White Fragility, which even the title gives me a moment.
Yeah.
Gives me a moment.
Yeah.
And one of the things that the author said is she spoke of white people as a group, and we have often not thought of ourselves that way. I think that's a little bit different from your community. And maybe there's an interchange there.
Yeah, I think here's the best way to explain what you're saying with this idea of even this concept of race and being able to understand it from another person's perspective, and yeah, I applaud you for reading that book, and I know what you mean. I bought it actually in the airport, and I remember just like reading it, and you're just like, what are people gonna say when they see the cover of it? But I think this is an example that I think is helpful. I met Michael Jackson, one time. Yeah.
Are you kidding?
No, like straight up, exactly.
We should probably just do another installment just for that.
Right, right. So, I meet him. I'm not going to get into the story, but obviously that's a story you want to tell at parties. And, you want to tell everybody, hey, I met Michael Jackson. No one believed me. Like, no one believed me. I was with my, the girl I was dating at the time. No one believed me. They didn't believe her. We had the same experience. She and I both had the same exact experience because we were both there. We met Michael Jackson. No one believed us until we showed them the picture we took, right? And so what happens with George Floyd is for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, everyone saw the picture of the experience that Black people in this country were telling people about. And so when we look at this idea of race, what I think is super important for us to get is I think for the first time, we saw each other all as one race. I think people saw with what happened with George Floyd, like, wait a second, that's a person there. And this is happening to this person. And for some reason, it keeps happening to this particular group of people who we actually all are part of the same thing. This isn't an episode of Star Trek. There aren't Klingons, there aren't this, we're all a part of this human race, which we have different ethnicities, but we're all a part of the same race. And I think finally what our white brothers saw is, that's not okay to happen to a human being. Right. And we're seeing that these things are happening to human beings that look differently. And why is this consistently happening? Enough is enough. And so I think that's the most important concept for me when it comes to race, is understanding that we're all a part of the same thing. And if you want to take it further for those who are Christians, like, that's the essence of what the gospel says. Right. Like, we're all a part of this one thing, so.
Right. And I mean, who has the image of God?
Exactly.
Right. That was poured out to all his people.
Exactly.
For sure.
Yeah. So
that's I think that's important. I think you're right. I think that was a moment, a tragic and terrible moment. But so let's deal with our just because we have limited time.
Yeah.
Let's deal with how this affects the church from a sense of I don't know if everybody knows, but like, we have regional conferences within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which I believe were started in the 1940s, the mid-40s.
The exact date, I'm not sure. But how those things, got started, for those who don't know, and why race is an issue, in our church, is, the Adventist Church historically fell victim to the culture of its day of Jim Crow, and didn't embrace the gospel. Let's just call it what it is, because the gospel would never have allowed regional conferences to have gotten started from this perspective. A Black woman went to an Adventist hospital and was denied service. Right. Like, how can a gospel people who have God's last day message or a remnant even remotely, like, that should be the last thing that would ever happen. We couldn't worship in the same places. And so we're like, wait a second, we believe in this message. We believe in the word. We need to be able to do, to worship and do that ourselves. So what we did is we created regional conferences so that we could, worship. The gospel moved forward, things kept getting better. Even, Ellen White even said, until you find a better way, let's keep doing it this way. And the sad part is we haven't found a better way. And I'm going to be, honest, which has been so interesting, which is I'm glad to have this conversation, is the conferences were started because of the racism within our church from our white brothers, right? Now our white brothers are saying, hey, end your conferences and then come join us.
That's interesting.
And it's interesting, as opposed to saying, hey, we got this all wrong. Let's start from scratch
Right. Let's
and
rebuild.
build something up new. So that even within that tells you
That's interesting.
some of the issues that we still have.
Yeah, that's very interesting, even from almost a power perspective, right? And I'm with you. I think that we should. I think we should start over because I think it's time for our church to do that. Just even from a communication standpoint, but certainly from that. It's. I was at the conference with all the conference presidents, and there's a few things I didn't understand about regional conferences. First of all, I didn't really know their history, and I had some wonderful conference presidents who kind of explained that to me. Also, I'm from Southern California, and we don't have regional conferences on this side of the United States. It's mainly an eastern seaboard, kind of southern area kind of situation. Is that correct?
Yeah. And let me say this, to be frank with that, because I've pastored in regional conferences the first 7 years of my ministry, or so, something like that. We don't have regional conferences necessarily out here, but if you look at how we're
organized,
it's the same somewhat concept. Because, I've got a direct report for Black ministries, and then there's Asian ministries, and then there's, the Latino. So we don't have it exactly like that, but there's still that concept. And I'm not trying to speak to what that might be, but there's still this place to separate.
Now, let me ask you this question in honesty. Is some of it, I think we could talk about segregation, right? But is some of it also like a worship? We're worship churches, right?
Yeah.
Both of our churches go in and we worship. But they're different. So, does that create that segregation or separation, or does that, does that dig the lines deeper? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that's such an important, point that you're bringing up, because I actually think that speaks to the issue of racism, tolerance, and inclusivity within our church. Because if you listen to a lot of the different rhetoric about, look at our manual, the music that they would deem appropriate does not fit the African diaspora.
Doesn't fit my church.
No, you're right with rock.
But you're right.
But specifically, for us, even the kinds of things, and I know you guys also have an expressive kind of worship style, but a lot of the things that even from the top are deemed inappropriate always seem to fit our kind of expression and our kind of worship style. And so it doesn't simply become this idea of, oh, we just don't prefer that. It's just, no, how you guys are doing it is wrong. And so instead of us trying to, work through that together, it's almost like you guys have your stuff and then we'll have our stuff. And then when issues like this happen, it's like, well, that's your issue. No, that's not our issue. You guys, figure that out. You got your music, you got your conferences, you got your worship, you figure that out. Oh, and by the way, here's the only way you should figure it out. Because, we as Adventists really don't protest and we don't do that. And so you've got this group of people that has felt isolated even as far as worship, as far as sexism, as far as racism, and yet we're every nation, kindred, tribe, tongue, and people. So that's what makes it makes it difficult, which is why these conversations I think are so important, because in order for us, I think, to impact the world, we also have to really take a look at what's inside these sepulchers, as Jesus would say.
And even beyond that, what's in our hearts, right?
Yeah.
As we continue to process through an awakening that I think is happening.
It is. Tim, look around the world. Every rally and protest I've been at, I've been the minority. That's incredible. Mitt Romney is saying Black Lives Matter. Right. Something is happening in the world, and it's so funny. The church should be the one leading that. The church should be the one out front showing this gospel through how we care about all and how all are important. And what did Jesus say, in Luke 4? He's like, I'm coming here for those who are brokenhearted, who are, need to be set free. And there's a group of people right now that have been experiencing this for a long time. And, Black people have been experiencing oppression in and outside of church. And we all, as prognosticators of the gospels, as one who believe in the gospel, when we see the brokenhearted, that's what we go for.
That's what we have to do and continue to create. I'm so impressed with the continual work in advocacy and in education that you guys have done at your church to just be a consistent voice in the community for raising up those who are oppressed. I have a hard time saying that we're a white church. I think that's the predominant like worship culture.
Yeah.
But from Pacific Islander, Indonesian, Filipino, across the board, we have Black folk who come. Many who come to church before they go to your church.
Yeah, right.
I'm pretty sure.
Because they're like, we could catch that here, then get to us.
Well, we're on the way. We're on the 10, right?
Yeah.
So I think we get to do that. But if you could just speak into our hearts, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid of this issue because it's scary. It's scary to say Black Lives Matter. Like that's scary because I know the other things that are connected to it. I think it's scary in some cases to choose a side, right? Because you're going to lose, some, friends or some influence. Like this whole thing, unfortunately, is getting about sides. It's almost like you can't say let's hold police accountable and at the same time support police, right? And so what I would say is you have to pick a side, and the side is the gospel. In this life, there is no in between. Jesus said, you're either hot or you're either cold. And ask yourself, the question, as a congregation, as individuals within the congregation, the fight that I am about to engage in for equality, for justice, is that the side of the gospel or is that the side of the enemy? And when we say the enemy, we're talking about the spiritual forces in darkness. And when you see that this fight is about everything that Jesus talked about, bringing his message to a community, uplifting a community, sight to the blind, healing the brokenhearted. When you see that, wait a second, this gospel message is on this side. And when I bring that to this conversation, when I bring that to this argument, I'm choosing the right side. And the gospel will cause you to lose friends. The gospel is going to cause you to lose certain things. But in the end, you'll gain what you need in Christ Jesus. And so to me, I would say, don't be afraid to be on the right side of what's happening here. There are a group of people who have experienced, oppression, and the gospel's job is to come in and set people free from spiritual and all different kinds of oppression.
Right. Michael, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking your time out. I know that you are busy. You've got
anytime you call, we just got to do this.
We got to do this. We do.
Yeah.
We do, man. Sure. And so thank you. Would you pray?
No, absolutely. Father, I thank you for this conversation. That's what it is. It's a start of one. And I know we need to have many more. And God, I challenge that our conversations will move into actions and that we will actually just put our feet to the ground in different ways for your gospel. Because God, we know that as there's so many people who are hurting and, the Black community right now is just hurting, I know your heart is even breaking even more. And so God, as followers of you, our heart ought to break for the things that breaks your heart. And so we just pray right now for Crosswalk and as they navigate, and they're in a unique position, a very diverse church with different kinds of influences. And I pray right now specifically for, their pastor, as he has to navigate so much. I pray that you would give him wisdom. He's got to speak into this, and he has. And God, I know some of the things he's going to say are not going to be popular. But I know his job is not to please men, but it's to please you. So I pray that you would give him courage. I pray that you would give him the words. I pray that you would just continue to give him influence as he has so much around the United States that you have entrusted him with. And I believe, God, that Crosswalk can be a beacon of light for how these diverse congregations that might not look like mine can actually be at the forefront of a conversation to exact change, not only inside of this church, but outside of the church in the world. God, I pray for us as we partner together. I believe there's something here that we can do that can make this world a better place. And so I'm honored to do that in conjunction with what it is that you have for us. So be with us is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Pastor Kelly, thank you.
Man, thanks, bro.
Blessings on you and your ministry, man.
Man, same to you. Thank you for having me.
All right.